A warm welcome to all of you and our guest speaker for today, Dr. Alshoubaki, who is a visiting scholar at the University of Western Michigan University, at the School of Public Affairs and Administration. And she is currently an assistant professor at the University of Jordan. And her expertise and area of research here in the US is the issues of refugee resettlement. And she has a very long and illustrious record, which I will not go into. I will let her introduce her work. But suffice it to say that she is a Fulbright scholar who's here visiting us. And we were fortunate enough to connect and get her to visit Cal Lutheran. She's here visiting us to share her recent work on the issue of integration policies in the United States. And given her background, the fact that Jordan hosts almost 1 million refugees from Syria alone, I think makes her talk very significant in terms of understanding the governance mechanisms, the civil society aspects in terms of nonprofits and related issues, as well as how they coordinate and work together, and what lessons potentially that has for us understanding these issues here in the United States. Just a quick personal note before I hand it off to her. I did some work in Michigan, in Dearborn, Michigan, immediately after my PhD. So I was consulting research director for Access, which is the largest Arab American NGO in the US. So I spent almost a year trying to set up the think tank for research on Arab American issues in the US. And for those of you who don't know, the Midwest, and in particular Michigan, is the heartland of immigration for the Arab American communities. So it's not a recent phenomenon. Arabs have been coming to the United States for more than 100 years, I'd say 125 years now. And there's a long, illustrious history, very rich. So we are examining a small part of it. So I will hand it off to Dr. Alshoubaki for her talks. Then we'll have time for Q&A. And we hope you'll stay till the end or as long as time permits.
I will talk to you about the integration federalism, state and local efforts on integration. Also, we will discuss the laissez-faire approach and focus more on the hands-off approach in the United States. I will have some reflection also on the new deals of the New American Act, which is still not enacted yet. And we will finish with some conclusions and remarks. So let's get started, please. Immigrants in the United States. Immigrants comprise 13% of the United States population. Most of them are originally from Mexico, which is around 24%, which represent the highest percentage of immigrants population in the United States, followed by China and India, then Philippines, El Salvador, Vietnam, Cuba, and Guatemala, and Korea. Considering, for example, yeah, it does work? Okay, cool, thank you. So looking to the states that received or settled the most immigrants in the United States, of course, California with more than 10 million of immigrants, followed by Texas, then Florida, New York, and New Jersey. These are the largest states with number of immigrants in general. Considering some indicators of inclusions of immigrants in the United States, I picked some indicators just to lead us gradually toward the integration. Let's look to the language. According to the Department of Statistics, the number of, or 78% of the United States residents reported they are speaking English only, regardless of their nativity in the United States. Other language who reported speaking other language represented 22%. Among this 22%, 62% speak Spanish, then Chinese, Tagalog, Vietnamese, Arabic, French, and so on. However, immigrants are limited the English proficiency around 46%, which high percentage in compared to, for example, European countries. Here, this map represents the most spoken language in each state except English and Spanish. We can see that Chinese, French, and Tagalog, it's also more are spoken. It's like on the most of states. Also, let's talk about the types of job immigrants perform. If we compare between, for example, the immigrants mainly work on management, professional, businesses, services, sales offices, and construction, maintenance, natural resources, and so on. The vast majority of their work is on management and then services and so on. Look into the poverty of the immigrants in the United States. Relatively, yes, next slide, please. The immigrants, for example, they are slightly lower income in compared to native-born, and 14% of immigrants report they are living in poverty and below the poverty threshold. Okay, so if we are talking about this indicator, but we are talking about immigrants and immigration, the question is, who is immigrants in the United States? We have several categories for immigrants in the United States. The first category is refugees and asylum seekers. We call them forced migrants. Who is a forced migrant? A person who is unable or unwilling to return to their home country due to a well-founded fear of a prosecution, due to their ethnicity, race, religion, political opinion, and so on. So they just decided to stay, for example, in first asylum state, like neighboring states sometimes, or resettled into the United States. For example, the United States received around more than 11,000 of refugees during 2021. Most of these refugees are from Congo, Syria, Afghanistan, Ukraine, and Myanmar. Okay? Also, the United States granted around more than 17,000 of asylum to people who also seek an asylum in the United States. The other category that we are dealing with in the United States, which is all of us are familiar with it, which is unauthorized immigrants. The United States has around 11 million of unauthorized immigrants, which consider also a big number. Half of them resided in California, which represented 25%, Texas, and New York. We are not talking about, for example, we are not talking about other workers who hold non-immigrant visa, like H-1B or something. They are categorized as non-immigrant visa holder. We are focusing here on immigrants as refugees, immigrants, worker, or unauthorized immigrants. So before talking about the integration of these immigrants, let's talk about the definition of integration. What is the definition of integration? Several scholars, policymakers, try to define the integration, and you can find long list of the definition of integration in literature. So that's why we have everyone conceptualize the integration from their cultural context, from their, for example, ideology, political, and social attitudes. The most comprehensive, in my opinion, definition of integration, it's a process wherein newcomers, immigrants, and the communities in which they settle, both individuals and institutions mutually adopt each other. When we are talking about integration, we mean that it compromises the inclusion of newcomers and ensuring the internal cohesion of the society. Okay, this inclusion reflects that you need to enable members of immigrants to steadily attain the opportunity, and also to value the societal goals that are given to citizens from political, cultural, socioeconomic perspective. However, when we study, really, when we want to analyze any integration policy, so in the United States or in Europe or in the Middle East, we need to have like particular dimension and measures to work on. So you will find several dimensions you can study and analyze in any integration policy. For example, some scholars, study the integration from legal approach or from cultural, socioeconomic, sometimes economics, and then sociocultural. Everyone study the integration from different perspectives. The most, next please, Doctor, yes. It's like the most comprehensive conceptual framework for understanding integration from theoretical perspective. I consider it entails the main keywords of integration. The first domain of integration that we usually deal with is markers and means, which is the indicators of main activity in the public arena, such as education, employment, housing, and healthcare. This is the first domain. The second domain is the social connection. The social connection, which constitutes the interaction between immigrants and the people from the same ethnicity or religion, this is the social connection. And the second dimension in the same domain is the social bridge, which is the connection, the interaction between newcomers and other ethnicities or host communities. And the other relation in the same social connection, which is the connection between states, between the newcomers and the structure of the state, like laws, regulations, and so on. This is the second domain. The third domain, which needs to be emphasized in any integration policy and integration concept, the facilitators, which is the catalyst of inclusion, and the main instrument to remove the barriers of inclusion. Or integration. The first one is the language. This is the most important facilitator for the integration process. Then we have the culture and knowledge. That's why we find that we need to build like a cultural competency program to enable newcomers to understand and to be integrated in the United States. Safety, security, and stability. It's how to enable, for example, or how to study the current policy and understand if it reduces the feeling of temporariness or move these newcomers or immigrants toward more permanency. The fourth domain on integration is the foundation, which builds upon the sense of nationhood and identity, such as naturalization, citizenship rights, and human rights. These are the most components of integration. And if we need to understand the integration process in any country or any state, we need to look into these dimensions together to really make sure that these newcomers are integrated and included in host community in a very smooth way. So after discussing the integration from theoretical perspective, let's explore together the integration in the United States, the main policies, and the management itself of integration policy, and how different the integration of refugees from other immigrants category, for example. When we look into the integration policies at federal level, we see that most of the federal policy focuses on the children welfare, including, for example, the most popular acts, the No Child Left Behind Act 2001, the expansion of children's health insurance to cover legal immigrants' kids, and of course the language proficiency program. However, due to the lack of the federal level integration policies and bureaucratic bodies to deal with that, to manage the integration process, scholars and policymakers argue that the United States work based on the laissez-faire approach, which is familiar by hands-off approach. The federal government does not intervene in the integration or devise the integration process in a well-scheduled way. Okay, the integration process, it's considered in the United States ad hoc, and mainly it occurs by the local initiatives, and this is true. When I studied, for example, the management of forced migrants in Michigan, for example, you find it's like most of it's occurred through local initiative, the state government more than the federal government. In general, when we compare, for example, the integration of refugees or forced migrants to other immigrants category, the integration policies are directed toward also refugees and forced migrants in general. But of course, when we are talking about the next slide, please. The integration federalism, we find that it reverses the burden of responsibility and decentralizing decisions to make about the access to social goods that aids in integration, of course, and leaving most of integration affirmative work to institutions removed from the direct control of the federal government. Of course, there's no single entity has been designated to lead the creation, the implementation, and the coordination of national immigration integration capabilities in the United States. That's why you find the federal government provide limited fund for programs. This one contribute to the dissemination of information, the second way that the federal government intervene, and they focus on a program on language program and the adult education and workforce training. But if you ask me, when I conducted interviews with refugees or forced migrants during my current research, if refugees, for example, prepared to work on the labor market in the United States by entering a training session for a particular job, the answer is no. Most of them confirmed that they just go to the work without preparation for the labor market or for the American, at least American labor market. Next. So, as we say that, it's like we are in the United States, we following the laissez-faire approach. Some people goes with it, some people against it. So, generally speaking, one of the pros of this or the advantage of this approach, in country as large and diverse as the United States, one-size-fits-all approach is not desirable, even not possible. Some people consider this. The second one, it allows for local experimentation and innovation, which is true because you can explore different kind of initiatives and way to deal with this kind of course, humanitarian issues regarding integration. However, too many disadvantages you can find in this integration approach. The first drawbacks or disadvantage, it's worsen the notion of equitable integrations for refugees and for migrants. Why? Due to the differences on the experiences among states and host communities. Each state manage the integrations of immigrants in completely different way, and lack of, for example, equivalent indicators or measures to manage to compare the outcomes of integration among states or cities. I can tell you that when I studied in Michigan, for example, I found that, for example, Kalamazoo is managed the integration process completely different from, for example, Dearborn and Ann Arbor, for example. Even in Kalamazoo itself, you can find that the resettlement agency A provide different services and different kind of supports, unlike the other, for example, agency. So there is variation even inside in the state or the city itself. Of course, it causes also uneven integration outcomes, and this will also be reflected on the welfare of immigrants or refugees, because when we don't have like unequal measures for integration. We deal with the situation completely different. For example, refugees or forced migrants who arrived to the United States before COVID-19 is treated completely different after COVID-19. For example, I speak to some refugees who were settled first in Missouri and then resettled again to Michigan. The administration completely different, okay, which is relatively worse than Michigan. So again, the states are managed is completely different. Also, when we are like in comparison to, for example, some European states or European countries, immigrants in the United States are more likely to live in poverty and experience sharper inequality than native-born residents. Again, if we take, for example, the integration process in Germany, for example, in Europe, they feel like there is a particular policy. It's applied for different cities and different immigrants on the same way. So almost there are similarity on the dimensions and the process of integration. The number 4, when we are talking about the lack of a uniform national integration policy, this leads us to have like patchwork policy to provide some social support. Sometimes it includes some immigrants, sometimes it excludes others, and we have like unequal criteria among refugees or forced migrants in general, or immigrants in general. These are the most pros and cons for laissez-faire approach. However, state and local governments, they are doing a great job in integration in the United States. Like historically, local states and localities they were like the leader in devising and implementing the integration process in the United States. And till today, there is a growing activism in dealing with integration and helping refugees. There are different kind of efforts that state and local government do and are doing now to assist immigrants in the United States. For example, next please, yeah. The establishment of immigration offices to help immigrants. This started in 2014. The establishment of committees, boards, initiatives, and programs to handle immigrants' issues, and the new public and private partnership just to combine the governmental and non-governmental effort to support and to deal with refugees and immigrants' situation. For example, this kind of partnership, the National Partnership of New America, Cities for Action 2017, and the New American Campaign. All these initiatives and the new partnership just to support the pro-immigration policy and to facilitate the resettlement and the integration of immigrants in the United States. Thinking about or looking to the goals of these offices aim to convene local stakeholders to facilitate the interaction of immigrants and host communities. This is the first one. The second, they encourage the civic engagement of immigrants and nurture their community organization to support the immigrants. These offices streamline the existing services and for integration in each state and city. They publicize immigrants' economic contribution and develop initiatives to retain immigrant talent. These offices are very important and they provide like some kind of support for integration process and to foster the positive public discourse toward immigration and immigrants. However, yes, next please. Okay, let's talk about some examples of these offices. One of these offices, the most popular one, and it's in Nashville municipality, the Office of New Americans in 2014. It was aimed to help the immigrants on the metro areas. It's surrounded by the council member, department heads, members of the local chamber of commerce and non-profit partners, just to support the immigrants in the Nashville city. Followed by the 2014, around 44 formalized offices were dedicated to immigrants. These offices were not limited to like as a previous or as a former trial to support immigrants on the big cities or gateway cities. Now it's established on the like small cities like Nashville, Atlanta, Washington D.C. These cities which, unlike, for example, the most cities that host refugees or immigrants like New York or New Jersey. Next, please. However, these offices, as much as they provide support and for immigrants and the newcomers to the United States, they really face some challenges. One of these challenges is lack of resources to get things done due to the limited staff, small budget that hampered these offices from develop, for example, some initiatives to support the refugees. They struggle also to survive and justify their existence, specifically in places where there is some opposition for immigration and receiving immigrants. Also, one of these difficulties, the Federal Division of Powers also constrain the city offices from work. Such, for example, some integration approaches like naturalization or temporary protection from deportation and so on, it's still emanated by the federal government, and these offices cannot intervene on this. So these offices have limited power in some cases. So you cannot, for example, provide economic integration without provide the sufficient support on the legal approach of integration. That's why still the work of these offices or the influence of these offices are limited. Okay, so let's talk more about the integrations of refugees in the United States, and let's talk about the main stages of integration of refugees. Refugees, as we say that, it's the most arranged and clear category of immigrants that the United States understand they are coming and they prepared for their resettlement and integration. So if we trace the stages of integration, you can find main three stages: the pre-settlement stage, then the transition stage or the resettlement stage, and then the post-resettlement stage. At the first stage, the pre-settlement stage, which is occurred through the U.S. Refugee Admission Program under the supervision of the Department of State. In this phase, the United States study, for example, the emergency situation of refugees, and also review the potential support from the United States to resettle refugees in coordination with the United Nations Refugees Agency, UNHCR, to provide this kind of support. Of course, the Office of Refugee Resettlement start to prepare some options and a program to assist the new arrival refugees, and the Department of Security and the Department of Health and Human Services co-function together just to provide social support to the newcomers once they arrive to the United States. At that stage, the main process is the security check for refugees in the first asylum state, like Jordan or Turkey or Egypt and so on. For example, in this interval, the security check for refugees occurred through, for example, reviewing their history, then interviewing them, and then fingerprinting. Once the refugee got the fingerprinting, it's like parallel with the work of the Bureau of Population, Refugees and Migration, work on the location of the resettlement area of refugees, which state and which city will be settled in. Okay, and then they work and organize some program with the main resettlement agencies in the main resettlement agencies in the United States, with the related, for example, resettlement agencies in each state and city, which is usually faith-based organization. This is the first stage on the integration. Then it's like the refugee is ready now to move to the United States after the security check and all the coordination efforts to be directly settled to the state and particular city. Okay, so the preparation is ready. Then we start with the transition state. In this stage, the first the immigrants arrive to the airport, and then the local agencies greet them at the airport and provide the social support for them. For example, helping them to find housing, enrolling their kids in the schools, registering them in language courses, prepare them for job opportunities, and finding job opportunities for them. These are in this, and secure the medical assistance for them, and make them ready to adjust with their new lives. Okay. Then we reach, after that, it's like help them to be self-sufficient. So the self-sufficiency process, it's for the resettlement agencies, it depends from 3 months to 9 months or 8 months maximum. So after that, most of the social supports is stopped, and the healthcare and the nutrition services, or social supports, is maintained for refugees or forced migrants. Then we're talking about the third stage, which is post-resettlement. In this case, too many of the social supports is abridged and declined, and then the main supports it's provided in this stage is public, the temporary assistance for needy families, for example, in some cases refugee cash assistance and supplementary security income, Medicaid, of course, and refugee medical assistance. In this case, it's like sometimes once any refugee find a job, of course, in a collaboration with the resettlement agency, the cash assistance usually stop, except food stamp and healthcare. It's still going due to their income. These are the main stages of integration. As you say that, it's only for me, it's a spectrum of resettlement, but we didn't see a well-founded or a well-established program to integrate, for example, refugees or forced migrants into host communities. Therefore, the U.S. House of Representatives introduced the New Deal for a New American Act of 2021 due to the realization that the United States lack of federally driven integration policy. They should take the lead in this process and just to unify the efforts to enhance the equity of the integration of immigrants to ensure better outcomes. Okay, that's why this bill aims to establish federal initiative on a New American, to establish a new, a special office for a New American on the executive office in the White House, programs to promote citizenship integration and prosperity, also reducing barriers to citizenship, and to provide the legal support for refugees and forced migrants and immigrants in general, to establish a uniform refugee resettlement and integration in collaboration, of course, with state and local government to maintain their efforts in supporting immigrants and refugees and to providing the protection for immigrants. Again, this is still like a bill, has not enacted yet, but I think once this act hopefully enacted, of course it has pros and cons, but in general it will enrich the integration of immigrants in general experiences in the United States, and establish more equitable system to deal with immigrants and refugees issues. So before closing, let's share some remarks and conclusion from this presentation and from my research. The first observation regarding the integration in the United States, I think federalizing the integration process requires clear definition of integration and how it should be measured. This is the best way, just to have like a clear equation of the definition of and the elements of integration. A national coherent integration program can play a vital role in ensuring immigrant integration and make it easier, faster, and more successful. Because when we look to a unified or it's like a national integration policies, it's more successful and easier for immigrants. Expansion resettlement support to include longer-term integration goals beyond 8-month settlement period. Again, we need to distinguish between resettlement and integration. Because to be self-sufficient during 3 to 8 months, it's something cannot guarantee your integration. It's your survival, yes, but not integration. Provide more seed funding with complementary support from philanthropic sector to state and county or city government to establish their own immigrant offices. And of course, this is very important to maintain the existence of these integration and immigration offices. Integration policies should consider gender mainstreaming. Yes, it is very important. I noticed that most of integration programs and policies, it's like ignore the gender perspective of it. I didn't see, for example, particular programs aims to serve the gender perspective, gender issues, because we have like females, females immigrants and female forced migrants and traumatized female forced migrants, but we don't see particular governmental program to support or to consider the gender mainstreaming on their policy. And indeed, it's like the last observation, uneven allocation of resources in managing immigrants causes inequality among immigrants, which is, of course, delay the integration process and make the outcomes is getting worse within the time. And yes, thank you so much for your listening and your comments and questions, please. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Questions, comments, remarks?
Yes, please.
Actually, I do have a question. Can you possibly elaborate on how you came to interact with all the different people required to get this information?
Oh.
Where was your starting point in making this?
Okay, yeah, got you. Thank you so much. Yeah, actually, I'm working on a research studying the integration policies in the United States, and my study about the Syrian refugees in Michigan in selected cities. So it's like as a first step, I started to study the integration policies in the United States. And then after studying the integration policies in the United States at federal, which is in absence of this policy in federal government, and look into the state and, of course, cities or local government efforts to integrate forced migrants, and then I developed my own approach to define the integration, and then I conducted in-depth semi-structured interview with refugees as forced migrants, as resettled from the first asylum state, and then started to discuss their integration. So this presentation is like the product of my theoretical and policies observation during the study, and some reflections from the preliminary findings of interviews with the Syrian refugees in the United States. Yes, please.
How far back in the timeline did you look back on to when doing this research? What was the farthest back in terms of history, and did you look forward to finding information?
Okay, thank you for your question. Yeah, because when I started my research, I studied the immigration policies in the United States, and I looked to the policy since 1980s, which was the first refugees law, I think, around this. Then I just started to address some variation. I also reviewed the literature and what previous scholars talk and study about the integration policies in the United States. So yeah, I started with the Refugees Act 1980s. Yeah. And I also look into different studies about the integration. It's some it's like 1990s, because you know that the immigration system in the United States in 1980s and 1990s are way better than maybe the current system. We have like different changes, and you know, it's how the system changed. So, and by the way, the integration, yeah, of course, we all of us know that the integration policies, not only in the United States, all over the world, is impacted by the political ideology of the leaders. So yeah, sometimes it's more liberal, sometimes more conservative. So yeah. Yes, please.
What agency is the refugees and resettlement? What agency is that part of?
Okay. We have like, okay, most of them, if I remember the titles, I'm not that good in titles, but most of them are faith-based organization. Yeah, it's like Jewish organization, something. I'm bad on titles.
So they're not federal?
No, they're completely faith-based. Yeah, they are faith-based organization, and yeah, they work as like non-profit organization. Yeah, thank you for your question.
So if I may, Dr. Alshoubaki,
Yes.
so the organization you're referring to is called HIAS, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, HIAS. So that's one of the, actually the oldest refugee resettlement agency in the US. It started in New York City to help resettle Jews who are fleeing, I want to say from Russia, if I recall correctly. So that's, and I do have a question for you, and I think there was a hand up there. Is that correct? Yeah, please go ahead. I'll hold my question for later.
Did you look at the refugee crisis of 2016 to 2017 down at the border with Rwanda? All the folks from Central America and Africa were at the border, like hundreds of people, and that was when Trump was president, and immediately after fleeing to Mexico, where they weren't taking refugees.
I looked into the general impact of, for example, Trump administration policies and acts regarding, for example, closed border or travel ban policies and all that stuff. Yeah, but I didn't look into the it's like South America issues. Yeah. But I look into the Trump decisions and the act and how influence also, for example, forced migrant and refugees, and how it delays their, for example, resettlement in the United States, especially, for example, we are talking about Syrian refugees and Afghani refugees. And I asked the participants on my research how influence, for example, how did Trump discourse and administration and travel ban influence their arrival here, or if they arrived before or during this decision, how does it contribute to cause a stigmatization against them or not? Yeah, yes, thank you for your point. Thank you. Yes.
So the question for you, Dr. Alshoubaki, I do want to welcome my students who are here from the nonprofit management class. Thank you for coming. This was a requirement for them, by the way, so they're here by compulsion, but I hope you enjoyed this lecture. So on behalf of them, I do want to ask, in your literature review and experience, what role do nonprofits play in this process? Number one, and number two, related to that, of course, nonprofits they raise their own money, but they also work largely off of government grants, right? So when you talked about resource constraints, so that's basically it's the government has to fund them to do this work, correct?
Yes.
So if you could please elaborate on that a little bit based on your interactions in Michigan, that would be great.
Thank you, thank you. Again, it's like these, even NGOs have a problem on securing money and funds. So most of initiatives sometimes start, and then after stopping the funds, it's also these initiatives are incomplete or stopped for financial issue, of course. Most of the NGOs and the programs or initiative for immigrants it's like impacted by the fiscal stress that and lack of financial support from the government, of course. And I noticed that, for example, it depends on the NGO's capacity. For example, if you are in Kalamazoo, if you compare one of the resettlement agency, they provide wide services, started from housing, cash assistance, and sometimes helping in doing the homework with the immigrants' kids. On the other side, some resettlement agencies with very limited fund, you find them, they do the minimum and they provide the sufficient support, but with their limited, with financial limitation, they cannot maintain this kind of support. So again, it depends on the capacity of the NGOs to secure money. Yeah, and sometimes it's hard. Yeah.
If I may follow up with that, speaking from a Jordanian perspective, I mean, you're a native of Jordan and you've spent significant time doing research there as well. So if you could speak to your experience, both from a government agency's perspective in Jordan and NGOs. So how does that work and how is it different from the United States?
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. It's completely different. Why? Because, okay, Jordan is a very poor country. So it's like receiving around more than 1 million refugees, only 600,000 of them registered by UNHCR. But how the Jordan government provide this support? Of course, from the international community. The first, it's like the key player in Jordan is UNHCR. We have like the first memorandum of understanding were signed in 1998 to help Iraqis refugees, and then it's extended to cover Syrian refugees after the Syrian refugees crisis. UNHCR helps the Jordan in managing and providing sufficient support to Syrian refugees from housing, education, and so on. This one, and after it's also Europe provides sufficient support to Jordan to help to assist, for example, in dealing with refugees crisis. But when this kind of support increased after 2015, why? Because the best way for Europe to reduce the incoming of immigrants into Europe by providing financial support to Jordan to receive more refugees. So we signed different kind of agreements with the European Union. One of it, Compact 2016. It's to help refugees, the Syrian refugees, to access to the Jordanian labor market, waiving, for example, the fees and providing job opportunities for them, okay, in exchange of money, of course, and helping Syrian refugees also for example, in education in schools and universities. Also, the European Union helped Jordan in a fabulous program. It's called Edu Syria. They provide like financial support for Syrian refugees to study in private and public universities. Also, Germany provides different kind of support for both for refugees and host community. We have like different program like cash for work program, cash assistance directly to the to refugees and host community. So we are managed at the beginning of the crisis. Local communities and local organizations tried to help, but the crisis was way beyond their capacity. So as normal, as like usual in developing countries, the international community helped through agreements. This is the way. By the way, it's like in Jordan, refugees, unfortunately, some of them live in camps and some out of camps. The vast majority is out camps, but we have like camps for Syrian refugees and refugees in general. Yeah. And the administration of camps is completely different. Security and healthcare, education, completely followed the government. But we have like some European NGOs also help in managing, and Gulf countries also help in managing the service on the camps. In Jordan, we have the Atri camp, is the largest camps all over the world, I think. Yeah. So the administration.
Any other comments? We do have a few minutes.
Yeah, it's also if I want to mention one thing. When we are talking about the integration for Syrian refugees in Jordan, you cannot compare it to the integration of the United States. Why? Because Syrian refugees and Jordanians are similar. Why? Because all of us are Arabs, speak Arabic, Muslim, And Sunni even. We don't have like all of the Jordanians are Sunni and Syrians are Sunni. And the community cohesion is strong already because like we have like several relations with Syrians due to the borders and all that stuff. Some of Jordanians already before the war married to Syrians and vice versa. So this kind of, we have this kind of relation, but what's the problem of Syrian, or what is the difficulty for Syrians to be in Jordan? It's poverty. Jordan is a very poor country and with very limited resources. This caused the problem. But Jordan receive refugees in general as first asylum state to stay in Jordan 6 months to 1 year and then resettled in Europe and the United States. But this resettlement sometimes doesn't happen. Yeah. Any question, comments, please? Yes, please.
Thank you for the presentation. Good information to share with us.
Thank you.
In looking at the information and your data on how fiscally our refugees and those who are resettled are managing, do you see any correlations aligning with particular states of placement or language matches in different areas? Or is there any indicators as to where people are being more successful and not falling into poverty, or is that still an open area?
Okay, thank you for your question. Thank you so much. Yeah, I have my observation. It's like when I conducted the interviews with refugees, I have not finished yet, but yeah, most of them prefer to stay in Michigan. Why? Because Michigan Arabic, the Arabic language is the most spoken language after English. So they prefer, even the community is more welcoming because the vast majority of them are Arabs. We are talking about other nationalities, of course. So I think, for example, some cases, some Syrian refugees were unable to stay in Vegas. The first time, the first resettlement state was in Vegas, and they have difficulty because due to social and economic differences, it's big cities with different dynamics, so they prefer just to move towards to Michigan because people are accept the culture, or there's some similarities due to, for example, the concentration of Arab in Michigan in particular. It's like, yeah, in Missouri, for example, I didn't see this kind of support, for example, that's provided to newcomers directly who arrived to Michigan. For example, some refugees just moved from Jordan as a first asylum state to Michigan. They feel the kind of the range of service and social support is way bigger than the kind of support in Missouri, for example. That's why some refugees, they moved from Missouri to Michigan. This, and if there are other things to indicators for Syrians to successfully integrate or not, I found something. It's their personal decision. Some, they just go outside and work, and they have this audacity to confront the life. So they have like they get easier to connect with people and with the community, and they make good money, and they just become self-sufficient way easier than other who feel like unwilling, they are unable to get involved in the community, and they may be shy due to their language barriers and all that stuff. So sometimes it's really, it depends on the person. I noticed that. It depends. Yeah. Thank you for your question. Any question, comments, please? Yes, please.
I have a question in regards to the different policies in states, right? So we know that, for example, Missouri is quite conservative, Michigan kind of goes up the board. Do we see that the increase in political polarization in the United States affecting the patchwork approach, the laissez-faire decline, right? The laissez-faire approach that we currently have with local municipality governments, right? So you said there was differences in Kalamazoo versus Ann Arbor. So do we see that increased polarization in the U.S. is kind of
Unfortunately, yes. Yeah, of course. This is at least what you and I think, or people. It's like, yes, it's policies. Policies are a product of the politicians' mindset and the people mindset. So yeah, some cities or states against immigration and immigrants. So yes, you will find some conservative point of view against them, of course. Yeah, this is what we think about it. What it's like also it came to my mind now, for example, I asked some Syrian refugees if they say that if the current, for example, the Trump administration influence or stigmatize their relation with people, they feel like people are different, American people are different from American politicians. So at personal level, people are so welcoming, nice, they accept them, and they feel like, yeah, the United States is a multiculturalism country, and not everything heard on news or something personally touched them, but in somehow it has direct influence because it's policy. Yeah. Thank you for your point. Thank you. Yes, please.
Just to say, compare what you were saying with the situation with the Syrians and the polarization of different states and how we welcome or not welcome refugees. If we look at the Vietnamese who came in the 70s,
Mm-hmm.
and the Philippine people who also came then,
Yeah.
they were given so many opportunities.
Yeah.
And they were basically welcome.
Yes.
So they integrated and they are happy. They now look down on the new refugees, not acknowledging that they got the opportunities that these new refugees don't get.
Yeah.
And I know of this because I have talked to some Filipinos who look down on immigrants from Mexico or people who come now, and they don't realize that you come here for different reasons, but if you could integrate, you could learn the language,
Right.
you have more opportunities, but we are not welcome. We're not always welcome.
Yeah. It's absolutely, thank you for the point, because it's always come to my mind that, it's like the immigration policies and immigrants, it's like in 1970s and 80s were way better than, the current policies and position. And again, it depends. And sometimes, you can think about it also from different perspective. It is. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah. Any question, point?
All right, folks, I think officially we can call it an end. And I want to give Dr. Alshoubaki the last word if she wants to say a few words to conclude. And then there's food. Please hang out here and you can circulate and continue the conversation. Officially, I know some of you have other commitments, so I want to make space for you to leave if you have to.
Thank you. I would say thank you so much. Thank you for coming, really. Thank you.